got a pipeline where they're popping out merchant ships multiple times a day, it sounds like. And we can only build one or two. That is a separate issue from being able to fight the war in Iran and maintain deterrence in the Pacific at the same time, which can only be done on a limited time frame. And the maintenance issues are absolutely a strategic nightmare, and I have no idea how to fix it. You just can't throw money at it. It would take some kind of World War II kind of mobilization to be able to fix that kind of problem.
I want to pivot back to Iran just for a second, Anson, and talk about the strategy there and the abilities or perhaps inabilities to fight the asymmetric war that has been presented, especially in the Strait of Hormuz, where the president keeps claiming it's under, it's open, visiting, and prior to the war was 100 to 200 ships a day. That's a big depletion in terms of tonnage going through, and certainly would not be in my realm of definition opened and controlled by the United States. Does this show a lot of inabilities by the U.S. Navy that should have been projected, and maybe the strategy was not the best here?
Absolutely. It's a huge mistake, just like it was a huge mistake for the Soviet Army to allow themselves to get stranded on an interstate highway and unable to muster enough forces to take over one airport near Kiev in the initial stages of the war. Could anyone have imagined a year ago that any other sea lane, like the English Channel or the Straits of Taiwan, the straits in Southeast Asia, that is absolutely stunning. And it is a classic example of trying to fight today's war with the previous war's ammunition, strategy, force structure, training, and you name it. And it's a wake-up call for the world on how to adapt to modern warfare today. And the Navy's right out there hanging out with egg all over their face, and they should be totally embarrassed that such is the situation, that we have, I don't know how many trillions of dollars and lives and career, and I highly criticize the leadership of the Navy for being in such a situation today.
So I have one final question before I invite other folks up on the stage who may have questions for you as well, Anson, and I appreciate you giving us this time. I know the people don't know this, but I just messaged Anson 30 minutes before we opened the room and asked if he could do this. So I appreciate you making the time. I want to ask you a question which is not in your wheelhouse, but I'm sure as a Navy guy you're paying very close attention to. And that is the Commander-in-Chief, the President, yesterday issuing a directive ordering the Navy to replace the Advanced Electromagnetic Aircraft Launch Systems, I had to look up the actual name, with traditional steam catapults on the future Ford-class carriers, beginning with the one under construction right now, the USS Doris Miller. The Navy and the defense industry in general, as you know, have been historically resisting the shift because it would cost multi-billions of dollars just to redesign, and the loss of electrical optimization built into the new class of ship. To do this, whether he just is nostalgic or whether he's being advised, on the surface it seems very ill-advised, and again, recognizing that you're below the water level kind of guy, and this is an aircraft carrier. Still, I'm sure you have thoughts about that.
It's unbelievable. I'm overusing the words unbelievable. But Gary, I read the Washington Post every morning, and my jaw just drops every day when I read it today. These days, weeks, and months. Reunion last October, going back to the Naval Academy. And there were, we're all in our mid 80s now, graduating in the class of 65. And it was more backpatting, telling jokes, getting reacquainted with people we hadn't seen for 60 years or more. But there was a lot of consternation and discussion amongst a bunch of old farts, if you will, about these kinds of things. And now let's talk about catapults on aircraft carriers. We made the transition. It's like a big plunger, and it's got a hook attached to it, and you hit it with a bolt with steam that drives that plunger forward, which drags the airplane and gives it the momentum to launch off the ship with enough momentum that it's able, and the airplane is at full open throttles, full power at the moment that the catapult is released. And the airplane launches. Everybody's seen videos of that. They developed an electromagnet rather than using steam, it leaks. It's a lot of pipes, high pressure steam, very high pressure steam, over 1,000 pounds per square inch. Dangerous. That stuff leaks. You have to replace valves and pipes and gaskets. It's a maintenance nightmare. And so they went to electric. It's basically an electromagnetic pulse that provides the momentum. No steam leaks. All you have to worry about is having the wires connected and have a strong enough motor. Better system from my perspective. And I don't know what's driving the technical argument in the Navy to what are the arguments pro and con, steam versus electromagnetic. But those problems ought to be determined by what it used to be called Nav Sea Systems Command, which is that's the part of the Navy that is responsible for design, construction, maintenance, overhaul, and Chief of Naval Operations. And why in the hell the president's getting into it is, you talk about micromanagement. He should stay far away from that, just like he wants the Navy to build more battleships. Not get me started on that one. So yeah, this is more Trump stupidity, overkill, weighing into stuff that he has no business weighing into, yada, yada, yada.
Someone's going to probably do an investigation. I hope we still have good investigative reporters out there, in spite of the fact that there are much fewer reporters today than there were yesterday, and there will be fewer more tomorrow. That's how terribly eroding the journalism profession is these days. But I hope there's still some enterprising, credible people who are following the money to see whether there's a financial benefit to making this switch to people who may be close to the president. I don't know, but because of some of the discussion we've had about those kinds of things, I have somebody on that right now. Answer, you don't mind?
If I was the commander of Naval Sea Systems Command, it's a 3-star, maybe a 4-star admiral, commander of Naval Sea Systems Command. May be a different term today. That's what it was called 40 years ago. But he's in charge of all that stuff, and he says, what in the hell's going on? Why are we having this argument about catapults? I'm going to get into it. I'm going to roll up my sleeves and get ground truth about what the hell's going on, and then I will make command judgment which way to go. And I'll keep the Chief of Naval Operations informed, and if money's involved, the Chief of Naval Operations and I will testify before Congress and explain why we're doing what we're doing. So the Navy is able to investigate those kinds of things. Whether they have the courage to do it or not, who knows? That's one of the reasons I left the Navy in disgust after 2 years in the Pentagon in the late 1980s. I couldn't believe the way that system worked. There was never a ninth inning. The arguments just kept going, and this is 40 years ago, and I told influential people, including the Chief of Naval Operations. I briefed him one day and I said, Admiral, in this food fight over force structure in just the Navy and getting the money to build the ships for that force structure, I said, Admiral, in the future, there's going to only be two kinds of ships in the Navy, submarines and targets. I think that's true today as well.
I lied when I said that was my last question, and I know people are anxiously awaiting the opportunity to question you as well, so I'll get out of the way, but I do have a final question, and that is recoverable. Can the Navy return to the glory of yesteryears, and maybe not even the glory of yesteryears, looking forward to the future, a new, more effective Navy, or are we so stuck in the politics, both internally and externally, that we're kind of screwed now?
Well, look at the state of the Navy in 1941 and look at the state of the Navy in 1945. Can the Navy resurrect itself? Actually, can the nation unify and provide the resources to rectify not only the United States Navy, but the rest of the nation? I have enough confidence that with the right leadership and the right political skills, even in our highly divided democracy, that capability still remains within the body politic and within the heart and soul of America. And if I'm wrong about that one, then Gibbons needs to get reborn and write a multi-volume book about the decline and fall of the American empire.
Thanks, Anson. And again, I appreciate you giving us your time and your expertise. Scott.
Yeah, I don't know much. I just have a question for Anson. I wonder, you talked about Trump and some of the battleship enthusiasm and other decisions. I wonder just how much administrative leadership matters at this point. Like, you have Hegseth at the top. How much does the Secretary of Defense and then the folks under him, the appointees and things like that, how much does this shape logistics, supplies, being overextended, that sort of thing? To what degree does a really capable secretary and then undersecretaries and people under them and something, to what degree does that make a difference in here?
It makes a terrible amount of difference. There are plenty of officers that are serving out there at sea right now that are a hell of a lot smarter, more experienced, better trained, you name it, than I was. And I'm sure that there are carefully guarded but still private discussions going on about matters such as this. What is the sense of the Navy's reaction to Hegseth gathering 800 flag officers, generals and admirals, for a show and tell public chewing out media stunt? I'm sure the reaction was, at least in significant parts of the Navy, just like mine, with the use of a lot of four-letter words to describe our opinions. So it matters a lot, and we are experiencing, not only in the Navy, our Defense Department is in terrible trouble right now under the leadership of Donald Trump and Pete Hegseth, and I have to blame the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. He has not been seen or heard of for some time now publicly, because basically either they created it or the civilian leadership created the decision to go into Iran. And the fact that uniformed bureaucracy allowed that to happen without strong public debate and debate in Congress is a tragedy.
I think maybe they're keeping their heads down, folks like that.
Exactly. You got to survive if you want to. If you're If you've got 15 years of the Navy, you're invested in it, you're trained in it, you're a band of brothers, you like your job, all the positive things, and you're under a cloud like this today, you hold your breath and you wait for things to change. That's like going to a ship with a really bad skipper. There's not a lot of things you can do about it. You can basically just hunker down, do your job, maintain a low profile, and wait for the skipper to leave under normal circumstances after a 2 or 3 year tour.
And so I'm curious, do you think, I know that Hegseth and Trump are very happy.
And supporting cast of civilian leaders and some uniform service leaders as well. I don't know who they are, but it's not just Trump and Hegseth. There's a gaggle of civilians and very senior officers in all the services that are up to all these shenanigans.
I just wonder, I know that there's the war on DEI, right? And they're pretty thrilled that they've
As there should have been.
Right.
But that's a different argument.
They're pretty thrilled with this and with it. But I wonder, is the reaction to this, sometimes the cure is worse than the disease. And I wonder if this sort of opposition to DEI and this sort of stuff has created another form of politicization in the military, where the reaction to DEI becomes the new politicization of the infrastructure and the commands.
Well, do you accept current policy or do you advocate change? That's a political decision, basically. And in my view, DEI was undermining the operational readiness of the United States Navy. Okay, and that's a long debate, long argument, and I'll get hissed and booed and garbage will be thrown at me, but that's my position, and I think it was a wise move to, how many admirals? We've got more admirals than we've got ships in the Navy today, by the way. How many of those admirals are
Is that for real? Do we really have more admirals than ships?
Yes.
Wow.
And how many of those admirals have jobs that do things that are not in direct support of those forces deployed around the world for peacetime deterrence or the current war in Iran? And there are a lot of them that have jobs like that.
Thank you, Scott, and we'll go to Tiger, followed by Alyssa.
Well, thank you, Gary.
By the way, I hope I'm not recalled to active duty and court-martialed by Trump for saying some of the things I'm saying publicly.
Yeah, well, there was an attempt to do that to a U.S. senator. There's no question about that. Go ahead.
Yeah, first of all, I want to say my regards to Anson. Anson is probably one of the most, one of the people that I respect the most on this app. And we've had many exchanges in the past. So I don't have specific questions. I'm going to say something, of the things that are on my mind. And I hope Anson would just, if you want to, just feel free to react to them. And feel free to interrupt me because I think you would be far more knowledgeable than I am. What I'm going to say is mostly the observations that I get from Chinese think tanks who have been following the U.S. Navy for a long time. And, it's interesting because we knew of the Abraham Lincoln incident. I saw it first on the Chinese internet before I saw it on the U.S. internet. So there are plenty of people that are following and studying the U.S. Navy on China's side. So firstly, I want to make a comment about the catapult system on the new the new carriers that the Americans have been building. So it's the first time the Americans have fitted an electronic magnetic catapult system. But to design a system, the biggest problem that we see in this procurement process is basically a design flaw. There are different ways you can do it. The Chinese way, when we did it, we used a DC driven one. The American one is an AC driven one. There's an alternating current. And the issue of this is that it's not a separate system. To design a catapult system that uses electricity, you have to integrate all your electricity system that has to do with the propelling of the ship, that have to power your radars and electronics and communications. So you have to share the power between many components. The problem with the US design and procurement process is that a lot of these systems are being given out as subcontractors. They would almost independently design some of these systems, and the Navy would try to put them together and in hope that they will function well together. But with a very complex system that's kind of pioneered for this class of the ship for the first time, obviously that backfired. So what we actually see in the new ship is that there was 3 elevators designed to put the jets from the storage to the deck. Only 2 of them are reliably operational, and the rumor expected lifetime or service interval between launches is under 200 launches, which is about 2 of it means that it's basically not combat worthy. But the trouble again is that since it's a system that is integrated with all the other subsystems of the ship, to redesign that system, that would mean you have to redesign your propelling, you have to redesign the power ratings for your radars. So it's a wholly comprehensive redesign for many of these subsystems that would be very cost prohibitive. And similar things we observed in the Constellation class that basically was designed to be a cheap revamped ship that was built by Italian design. And we also see some chaos in the requirements. That's by either the Pentagon or the Congress. They kept trying to improve on the design requirements, that they're demanding more and more things from this ship. And they ended up not being able to use the components that were already designed that would actually lead to the cost saving. So it went over budget, over time, and built a ship. The final result of that ship is not very combat worthy based on their own evaluation. So that ship cost billions of dollars, was only built, I think, 1 or 2 vessels before that the program was entirely scrapped. So definitely in the design phase and the procurement phase in the US Navy, there's some problem there. And we of course know about the hollowing out of the US industrial base, the lack of capacity to maintain, to build new ships, as Anson have already alluded to. So yeah, it's a multi-pronged problem that will plague the US Navy for a long time. Secondly, on the morale problem, there's a very interesting case study that some Chinese think tanks have gathered from the US Navy. There are a lot of US ships that are relatively new. Like if you look at the photos, you're going to discover that many of the panels on a ship have rust. They have rusty panels. The thing about ships is that all of them will have rust, right? The ships are designed to have some kind of rust on the ship and still function. So the US Navy has made an assessment of the rust that it does not affect the battle readiness of the ship. But as there were more media reports on the rusting of the US ships, at some point one of the general in the Navy decided to put out a notice to the sailors that they need to spend part of their week maintaining the ship and basically clean up after the rust and reapply the paint over those panels so that they would look newer. But quickly, what the Navy found out is that the maintenance on those old ships, new and old ships, some of them are kind of stretched over their design service lifespan. It's so heavy of a task that sailors are already overworked and they do not have the extra cycles to be able to properly complete the cleaning after the rust. So that was put paused because actually trying to clean up the rust itself jeopardized the operational readiness of the ships.
Okay, so you threw two problems at Anson. I'm going to give him an opportunity to respond to both. One, the AC powering of the catapult system, and the second, the rusty hulls. Anson?
Well, I'm not going to get down into the grass. The Navy's capable of making those kind of, and I was a deputy squadron commander, and I used to travel, go to sea on ships assigned to my squadron, or force commander, Atlantic and Pacific, and I would inspect ships. And I'll guarantee you, Tiger, a dirty ship is a poorly trained and functional, operationally functional ship. The cleanliness, the maintenance standards have to be upheld. It can be done. It takes demanding and very sensitive leadership, but the ability to do that, to keep your ship clean, functional, and well maintained, which can be done, are the same leadership skills that are required to not have an officer of the deck that's going to run the ship aground in the middle of the night or have a collision in a high traffic sea lanes. All those things come together, and it's the leadership of the commanding officer. He sets the tone. He sets the tempo of operations. Is he too hard? Is he too soft? Where's the right sweet spot for each individual ship? And that's a very difficult decision to make, but you can see the difference in 10 minutes when you walk aboard a ship. And a dirty ship is not going to be a ship that you want out on the carrier battle group line in the war in Iran.
So specifically, is there a problem with the construction that's causing rusting as a type? Are you even aware of that issue?
Yeah.
I don't think that's what you didn't hear me right. Actually, Anson kind of completed the story for me because I think it's actually pointing to the discipline of the sailors. But it's compounded with the fact that a lot of those ships are harder to maintain now because of their age and things like that. And there's actually a second part of the story where they decided to have another contractor design a new kind of paint that would allow the sailors to maintain the ships less. And the second part of the story is even that actually didn't turn out very well either. But I think Anson already kind of alluded to what I was trying to get at.
Okay, Tiger. I am curious. Maybe I misinterpreted. What causes the ships to rust? Is this a maintenance and discipline issue, Anson?
Almost always, yes. The availability, the time in port, to be able to do the maintenance, the discipline and demand, the sharing the load. You pull into port, and the tendency is to let the crew go on liberty and rely on sailors not from the tender or from the shore facility, or even civilians to come aboard and get the ship clean. That's the wrong way to do it. You have to integrate those workforces so that the ship's company is always on the leading edge of doing the things that need to be done in a busy, demanding environment when a warship returns to port. And again, it's a leadership issue.
Gotcha. Thank you, Anson. Alyssa, followed by Daryl. We lost Alyssa. Daryl? Well, no, she's still here. Alyssa, followed by Daryl.
Real quick. I was gonna ask, is your car American?
Oh, okay. Thank you, Alyssa. That's very apropos to today's discussion. Daryl, followed by David.
Hey, yeah, Gary, can you hear me?
No.
Okay. So I would like to answer the question as well. So, McKinsey, there's a video going around. It's McKinsey and Company, which is a large consulting firm, if no one knows it. But there's a video of a McKinsey consultant in 2010, and he was talking about what the implications of an attack on Iran might be, and and it was almost like a checklist. he said they would likely close off the Strait of Hormuz. And I forgot what the second one was, but the third one was that Iran would likely attack its neighbors in the region. So, what I'd like to ask Anson is, has what happened not been talked about? I mean, you were at the Pentagon. Has what has actually happened, has that not been talked about in rooms? Like, if we do this, this is likely what would happen. And if it had, do you think that the powers that be simply ignored the advice of the smarter people in the room? Or do you think that do you think they really thought that there might be a different outcome?
Well, all of my time, except when I just put my nose in places that it didn't belong voluntarily, the food fight, inter-service and intra-service, the food fight for money between the airborne Navy, the surface Navy, and the submarine Navy, and throw in the Marine Corps. There's enough of a food fight over resources there to consume the energy of, I don't know, the Navy staff. And the whole Pentagon had 25,000 people in it when I was serving there. So let's say maybe 8,000 people on the Navy staff. It was all a food fight over the budget. They were very, very seldom. I never participated in any formal strategic or even tactical discussions about how to use the forces that were being designed and built. That discussion took place down at the type commander and fleet commander level. So rarely was it talked about. The only place that within the higher echelons of the Navy that was talked about, and it was one of the best years of my career when I had spent a year at the Naval War College. And we got far away from all the food fights over resource structure and how much money to spend on maintenance and all that. The food fight over money. And we spent a whole year of long-term, deep study of history and current events in how to better prepare for a war, maintain deterrence, and fight the war if deterrence fails. That's the only place that in my entire career, where a serious discussion of that nature took place, and I absolutely loved that. It was, intellectually, it was by far the best years of my life in the Navy, including my 4 years as a naval kid.
So do you think it's possible, again, like if opportunity to meet the Secretary of the Army in 2019, and you talking reminded me of that meeting, because he said the same thing. They're always fighting for money. Their biggest challenge is getting more.
Yeah, but fighting for money is not the question that you first posed, right? I think the first question you posed was it not predictable that the Iranians would respond in the manner in which they did, and why wasn't that taken into proper consideration by the United States military when we engaged in Iran? I think that's the question in brief.
Yes, so what Anson just said made me think, is it possible that because there's noise with regards to these other things, that maybe someone in the room didn't bring this up, or they just used this as noise to not listen to the smarter people in the room?
Well, I can tell you, because going back to my time in the Navy, I never met him, but he provided lectures at the Naval War College, and I read many of the documents that he produced while he was Secretary of the Navy, and that was John Langdon. He was the Secretary of the Navy, by the way, that when he came in on Reagan's coattails, he summarily fired Admiral Rickover. Admiral Rickover he was past his prime. He was well into his 80s, and he was still a tyrant. And Lehman, with Reagan's support, was the one that got rid of him. And to the credit of the United States Navy, the Navy nuclear power program did not miss a beat when that happened, because the admiral the admirals since Rickover have maintained the technical discipline and authority and the operational perspective to keep those ships operating, to keep the crews functioning, etc. So Lehman is the kind of leadership that I would be looking for. And by the way, I thought he did an absolutely superb job on the 9/11 Commission after he was, long after he was Secretary. That's the kind of civilian leadership we need.
Thank you, Daryl. I would just say that from my reading of the situation, and you can juxtapose that with what you just reported about the McKenzie Group, obviously they knew, and it was ignored. And at what level it was ignored, we, I guess, don't really know. But as we have previously discussed in today's session, the current commander-in-chief tends to micromanage, and who knows, what he may have ignored or jettisoned for whatever reason that he did. But I would suspect, and I would hope that my suspicions are correct, Anson, that the people in charge of military operations, the CENTCOM folks, knew better, but they had to follow their orders from the chain of command.
Well, there undoubtedly, Gary, in the room, grave mistakes have been made in the leadership of the United States Navy for over some period of time. Of immediate concern is the warfighting advice. Do you go to war, and how do you continue to prosecute that war? And how that has been managed by senior leadership. I'm talking the flags primarily, the flag ranks of the Navy, how that has been managed. I'm deeply suspicious because I look at the outcome and I don't at all like to see what the outcome is. So there's got to be some blame flag officers within the ranks of the U.S. Navy. But of course that blame goes to the entire defense establishment and to Congress. Why is Congress letting this kind of stuff go on?
Well, you just anticipated my next question, Nancy. Why isn't Congress, and it could be closed door, I understand some of this can't be discussed necessarily in public, but why are they not holding these flag officers feet to the fire? I know they've had headsets there, but headset is a political hack. I want to hear, if I'm a Congress member, I want to hear from the people who are actually executing the plan, and whether they strenuously objected but ultimately followed orders, or whether they had recommended this. Who made these decisions ultimately? I think that's something that congressional oversight, that's their responsibility, and I think you're absolutely right in suggesting that they are abrogating their responsibilities here.
No doubt Congress is abdicating its responsibilities. I'll agree with that 100%.
If I could pronounce the word correctly, we would be in agreement.
Yeah, but the three-star admiral that I worked for was on the CNO staff. He was the director of he was the senior Navy admiral for the Pentagon food fights, and I helped prepare him for testimony before Congress. He got, but you never see or hear those lower level hearings unless it's some sensational sexual scandal or something. You very rarely hear of those things, and you never hear. They're sort of pro forma. We've got the greatest submarine force in the world, and we need more money. So here's why we need more money. Thank you very much. Well done, Admiral. Keep doing a good job in the testimony. That kind of stuff routinely goes on.
Right, but we're in a crisis situation here, obviously, that ought to be addressed by Congress.
I agree. Where is Mark Kelly now?
Right, he's running for president, so he's being very cautious about everything he says and does. And if he feels that it can help him in his pursuit of the Oval Office, he might do the right thing. But if he thinks that it's going to detract, and I'm sure he has plenty of advisors who are telling him, if you're going to, it's about getting there. So you have to do everything you do now has to be done with that in mind. He might not. So I think that's where Kelly is right now. I wish McCain were around, because I'm sure if McCain were around, he'd be demanding answers. David, followed by Linda.
Yeah, no, great room so far, Gary. Good to have Anson on stage, bring his deep perspective. But what we see here, though, if not failure of DEA policies, is the guys in charge are all white. There's nobody black, Mexican, brown.
Oh my God, they're all white.
Horrendous calls.
What are we?
140 days.
Oh my God.
And there's no other aircraft carriers available to replace it.
Oh no.
So, my question is, where's the inventory of the capability of our machinery, of our ships, and the morale? Is there a test there? I mean, we're down in Venezuela for a very long time before we pivoted to Iran. But where is the calling out of this by not only the administration, but the white senators? They've all been elected. They're not black
senators.
They're all white. Why are they saying, hey, President, you failed here in these appointments, man. We're sandbagged in the Middle East. Gas prices are rising. We're looking at getting washed out in the midterms. I mean, there's DEI failure here at the political level.
Oh no!
So, I want to see the old days with Colin Powell's and Susan Rice and Condoleezza Rice, and those types of folks were picked to run some very serious positions, and they come of
But
age.
were they picked because of the color of their skin, or were they picked because of their ability?
No. Gary, were the poor whites and the Mexicans and the browns that fought in Vietnam, were they picked because of their capabilities or their skin color? I mean, you can't have it both ways. You can't send people to the front lines. You can't send poor whites and blacks.
You're trying to imply, I think, and tell me if I'm wrong, that if the DEI policies had been adhered to, more capable people would be making decisions, and we wouldn't be in this quagmire that we are in today.
We don't cry DEI when there's white guys at the top creating the massive foibles in the name of our nation and our country.
I know, but the discussion of the room is not DEI.
Hello?
That if all the white admirals were replaced by minorities, we would not be where we are today.
That's not what I'm saying, Gary.
David, what are you saying, David?
Because we've had the administration champion the failures of our military and losing our strength and capability.
Yeah.
And then we
I understand that you're trying to make a point, but you know the rule of the room is that we're going to stick to the topic. So if you have a question that sticks to the topic, continue. If not, I'll move on.
Well, this is all happening because of white men.
Part of what's happening part of what I'm saying has everything to do with the topic.
No. You're doubling down when I've asked you not.
Yeah,
boy. Move on.
Yeah, boy.
Yeah, I'll give you your opportunity to respond, but I just want to say, we can have a discussion. We can hold a whole room on DEI. I'm happy to do that. And I'm happy to hear arguments. I'm not shutting him down because I'm opposed to DEI or because I'm in support of DEI. I'm shutting him down because it's really not the topic. I know it was alluded to, but it's not the topic of the room. But Anson, your opportunity to respond.
In 1992, an event called Tailhook happened. I won't go into the details, but that's what started the decline of the United States Navy. And it accelerated over the next 30 plus years. And to suggest that if we had more diversity in our Navy, that the situation in front of us would not be as bad as I alluded to, if only we had a more diverse leadership within the Navy. And I'm sorry, David, but leadership issue, it is not a racial issue, and the pickle the way that we're in right now.
So there are some kinds, when you talk about Tailhook, there are analogies to the culture that prevails in some law enforcement organizations. And as you know, that is in my house because I spent a good portion of my career covering the first responder community, and I got very close to the community. I'm pretty aware of the cultures that I saw. And what I found interesting in covering Detroit in particular, from when it was a predominantly white police department to when it later became integrated both racially and in terms of gender. And I could argue that there were absolute benefits from that integration. But when it came to the, let me use the term subculture of the department, some of the traditions that today might be considered distasteful, like tailhook, that culture was ingrained. It didn't matter if the new person on the block was white, black, Hispanic, Asian. It didn't matter. The culture consumed them because in order to get along, you want to get along. And so, and until the leadership, as you point out in the military, puts its foot down and puts an end to it, the culture continues. It only stops if there are ramifications as a result of it. So, with regard to tailhooks, I don't think it matters much whether it was a predominantly white military or not. I just think it was part of the culture of the Navy at the time. If I'm wrong about that, please do.
Well, not to get into a long debate, but the Navy, the condition of the Navy today is a reflection of the leadership of the Navy going back to 1992. The people that have made the decisions that have been leaders in the Navy for the, 34 years since tailhook, grew up in a Navy that was reacting to social concerns reflected in the culture observed during tailhook. I agree with you, that culture needed to change. But the focus became on socialism, social structure, social behavior, as opposed to the merit and of leadership, warfighting skills, etc., no matter what color you are or were. And what we see today is a reflection of that cumulative leadership in the United States over the last 30 plus years. And,
yeah, that's the debate I was trying to avoid here when I shut it down. So let's go on back to the topic at hand, and not talk about DI any further. And we'll go to, and I exacerbated the problem. I should have just shut it down and moved on. Linda, followed by Agent.
That's interesting. I don't want to go on it, but it did pop in my head because I had to actually study it in a psychology, like sociology class, and how it changed things. But anyway, make a long story short, yeah, I found this story to be kind of interesting just because I had a really good platonic friend years ago that was in the Navy, and he was on the USS George H.W. Bush, which I think is still active. It's not been decommissioned yet. But yeah, like the ships are getting older, like the maintenance of them, the logistics, and then I've just been reading all about this the USS Abraham Lincoln, like stuck at sea with this war with the Strait of Hormuz, and how they're having like all kind of problems with like rations, and mental health has suffered of the Navy men and women like on board. They're trying to jump off the ship, and they've been out at sea for like quite a long time. So I just found the whole thing like just really interesting. Just because like I said, I had a friend that was in the Navy, and I got to go to what was the name of that town? Newport. I got to go to like Newport in Virginia and visit him and like see the base and meet like women and men that he was in the Navy with. It was just a whole interesting experience, and it's definitely different being out on a ship like that for months at sea versus being like on land and stuff. When I was thinking about joining the armed forces, I did not pick the Navy. I did pick the Air Force because I don't know, just the idea of being on a boat and a lot of crazy stuff that can happen at sea, and then I get really seasick, so I went to the Air Force, but I didn't complete basic training. I was separated. I got like injured, so I didn't finish. But yeah, I didn't pick the Navy. And at the time for basic, women had to like cut their hair shoulder length, and I didn't want to cut my hair. But anyway, well, I don't think they have that regulation anymore. But anyway, I just found the whole story to be quite interesting, and I'm just thinking like there's so many engineers and logistics people and officer and like I guess like high-ranking people that I would hope to think that there's enough intelligent people in the Navy that can figure this out and resolve their problems. And I think I was reading there's going to be like an aircraft carrier coming to provide them with relief. But yeah, I heard there's like a whole thing where these ships need to be fixed or they need new ships, like they're getting old and they need better maintenance and so forth. I think a guy was speaking earlier about that, but I would just think, I don't know, we would have better or smart enough people to figure this out in our government, but the government also does crazy things at the same time as well. So thank you so much.
So let me just put this into a little perspective. Presuming the reporting, and as Anson pointed out, we don't know for sure, but presuming the reporting about what's happening on the Lincoln is accurate and that the morale problem is so bad that people are jumping overboard, there is one confirmed case of a guy who jumped overboard. By the way, was it a real suicide attempt? When you want to slit your wrists and kill yourself, you put the, I don't want to describe, but you put, because...
That's Gary Baumgarten, a faggot retard. We've been talking about the U.S. Navy. This is ChicagoMayorVote.com. I want to thank you all for coming. Hope you have a great Friday evening, great Saturday and a Sunday. It's called weekend. God bless you. Try to read a book, hit the gym. We're going to go break a